I watched my daughter crush my mother's crystal bowl beneath her designer heel. The cranberry sauce, the one I'd started making at 4 in the morning, splattered across her marble foyer like blood. "We don't do homemade here, Dad," Elena said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. 20 guests laughed. My hands, the same ones that had signed away millions to build her empire, trembled at my sides. But I didn't leave. Not yet, because folded in my coat pocket was a single manila envelope that would change everything. And Elena had no idea it was there. Let me back up. Let me tell you how I got here. 4 hours earlier, I'd been gripping the steering wheel of my aging sedan, watching the highway blur through freezing rain. The wipers scraped against ice in a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. My hands shook not from the cold, but from the Parkinson's my doctor kept telling me to take seriously. I was 71 years old, driving from rural Pennsylvania to suburban Boston, and every mile felt like a betrayal of common sense. But it was Thanksgiving, and I hadn't seen my grandchildren in over a year. In the back seat sat that crystal bowl, wrapped in 3 layers of bubble wrap and an old blanket. It had belonged to my wife Rebecca's grandmother. Rebecca. God, I missed her. 18 months since ALS had stolen her from me, one muscle at a time, one word at a time, until all I had left were her watercolors on my walls and her handwritten recipes in a battered box. The cranberry sauce recipe was from 1978, orange zest and port wine, her secret ingredients. I'd been up since 4 a.m. making it, my trembling hands carefully measuring, remembering how she used to hum while she cooked. I thought about calling Elena to tell her I was running late, but I knew she wouldn't answer. She never did anymore. None of them did. My 3 children, Elena, Marcus, Sophia, had perfected the art of being too busy for their father. I remembered Rebecca's last coherent words, 3 days before she died. She'd looked at me with those beautiful hazel eyes, still sharp even when her body had failed her, and whispered, "Don't let them forget where they came from." I hadn't kept that promise. The GPS announced I'd arrived at Elena's waterfront estate in Brookline. Valet parking, ice sculptures of swans flanking the entrance, a string quartet playing through outdoor speakers despite the freezing temperature. I sat in my car for 5 minutes, watching beautiful people in expensive coats glide past, and I thought about turning around. But I'd driven 4 hours, and I missed my grandchildren. 12 years ago, I'd sold Sullivan & Associates, the architectural firm I'd built from nothing. 43 years of designing homes, office buildings, community center structures meant to last. The sale brought $18.5 million. I'd kept $3 million for retirement. The rest went to my children. Elena got $6 million for her venture capital firm. Marcus got $5 million for his tech startup. Sophia got $4.5 million for her boutique hotel chain. At the time, Rebecca had looked at me across the dinner table and said, "You're making a mistake." But I'd waved her off. They were our children. Of course, I'd help them build their futures. I walked up the marble steps carrying that crystal bowl like it was made of hope. Elena's husband, Trevor, answered the door. "David," he said, "not Dad, never Dad. You made it." Elena's with the guests. The house was a palace. My architectural eye caught every detail: the vaulted ceilings, the imported Italian tile, the custom millwork. I'd designed buildings like this once. Now I lived in a 2-bedroom townhouse in Lancaster. 4 grandchildren were scattered throughout the room, ages 8 to 14. One of them glanced at me and whispered to her cousin, "Is that the old guy from Pennsylvania?" None of them recognized me. Marcus was there, absorbed in his phone. Sophia sat on a white leather sofa, recording something for Instagram. Neither looked up when I entered. Elena finally appeared, champagne flute in hand, draped in what I assumed was a very expensive dress. "Dad," she said, air kissing near my cheek, "you look tired. Long drive?" 4 hours, I said. Well, you're here now." I held out the crystal bowl. "I brought your grandmother's cranberry sauce, the recipe your mom always made." Elena took the bowl, examined it like it might be contaminated. "Grandma's old thing? Dad, we have baccarat crystal." "It's tradition," I said quietly. "Your mother made this every Thanksgiving for 40 years. Trevor had wandered over, drink in hand. "Is that homemade food?" He said it like I'd brought raw sewage. "Yes," I said. "I started at 4 this morning. Orange zest and port wine, just like—" "Elena, this is embarrassing," Trevor interrupted. "My partners are here. We have a chef. Chef. Tell me you're not expecting us to serve this." Something in Elena's face shifted. Not toward kindness, toward calculation. I watched her weigh her father against her husband's colleagues. I saw the moment she made her choice. She walked to the kitchen, and I followed. Hope rising stupidly in my chest. Maybe she'd just put it aside. Maybe she'd save it for later. Instead, she turned and faced the dining room full of guests. She held the crystal bowl high, like a trophy. "Everyone," Elena announced, voice ringing with performative amusement. "My father still thinks we're poor enough to eat homemade food." Then she dropped it. The crystal shattered against the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot. Cranberry sauce exploded across the white tile, across my worn shoes, across the pristine space. Shards glittered like broken promises. The room erupted in laughter. Marcus glanced up from his phone, smirked, and went back to scrolling. Sophia held up her phone, recording, her expression delighted. The grandchildren stared with blank confusion. Trevor raised his glass. "To moving on," he said. More laughter. I stood there, cranberry sauce on my shoes, Rebecca's grandmother's crystal in pieces at my feet, and I felt something inside me go very, very still. "Dad, you gotta move on," Marcus called from across the room. "Mom's gone. This whole sentiment thing is weird." I looked at Elena. Really looked at her. Waited for shame, for apology, for anything human. She shrugged. "It was just a bowl, Dad." I walked out. No one stopped me. No one called after me. I climbed into my car, turned the heat on high, and sat there shaking. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I pulled out of the circular driveway and started the long drive home. The freezing rain had turned to sleet. My hands could barely grip the wheel. At a rest stop 2 hours in, I had to pull over because my vision was blurring not from tears, but from rage. I thought about Rebecca's last year, the brutal progression of ALS, how she'd lost the ability to walk, to feed herself, to speak, how I'd fed her, bathed her, read to her every single night. Elena had visited twice. She'd sent expensive flowers to the funeral and left immediately after the service investor call in California, she'd said. Marcus hadn't come at all. Singapore, he'd claimed. Sophia had stayed for 3 hours, mostly on her phone. I'd buried my wife alone, essentially. And I'd told myself they were busy. They had lives. They had empires to run. Empires I'd built for them. I made it home at midnight. My townhouse felt smaller than ever, 2 bedrooms. Walls covered with Rebecca's watercolors, furniture we'd collected over 47 years of marriage. If you're feeling this story, hit that subscribe button. This is about to get intense. I walked into my study and unlocked the filing cabinet I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a folder marked, "Trust Documents Sullivan Children." My attorney, Margaret Chen, had structured everything when I'd sold the firm. I remembered the day clearly. She'd sat across from me in her office and said, "David, I'm going to build protection into this. Your children are ambitious. I want to make sure you're protected." I'd laughed it off. They were my kids. Why would I need protection? But Margaret had insisted, and I'd agreed, mostly to placate her. Now I spread the documents across my desk and read them for the first time in 12 years. Elena's $6 million. Revocable living trust. David Sullivan as trustee with full dissolution rights. Marcus's $5 million. Secured loan against his tech company equity, callable with 30-day notice. Sophia's $4.5 million. Limited partnership in hotel chain. David Sullivan holds 51% controlling interest. All 3 had signed without reading. I remembered that day too. The lawyer's office, the stack of papers, my children impatient and distracted. "Just tell us where to sign, Dad," Elena had said. "We trust you." Clipped to the folder was a handwritten note from Margaret. "David, these protections are in place because you know your children better than you want to admit. Use them if you must. MC." I sat there until 3 in the morning. reading every word, understanding for the first time what Margaret had built. A blueprint, an architect's plan. They thought it was theirs. They'd built their entire lives assuming that money was theirs, free and clear. But legally, I still owned everything. I didn't make the decision impulsively. That's not who I am. I'm an architect. I plan. I measure. I build carefully. I spent 3 days researching, calling Margaret, reviewing each child's current financial status. The picture that emerged was stunning. Elena's venture capital firm was massively leveraged. She'd used my $6 million as collateral to borrow $30 million more. If the trust dissolved, her entire company collapsed. Marcus's tech company was 2 weeks from IPO. The loan recall would crater the valuation, scare off investors, destroy years of work. Sophia's hotels were mortgaged to the hilt. Without the partnership capital, foreclosure was inevitable. They'd built castles on foundations they didn't own. I created a timeline on graph paper, the same way I used to draft buildings, calculated the consequences, measured the impact. On the third night, I held Rebecca's photograph, her smile forever frozen at 68. She would understand, I said aloud to the empty room. Monday morning, I called Margaret. I need you to file the paperwork, I said. All of it. There was a long pause. David, are you sure? I'm sure. This will destroy them financially. They destroyed themselves, I said. I'm just stopping construction. Monday at 2 p.m., Elena received the trust dissolution notice. By Monday evening, she'd called me 6 times. I didn't answer. Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., Marcus's company received the loan recall demand. His voicemail was frantic. Dad, this is a mistake, right? This can't be real. Call me back, please. I deleted it. Tuesday afternoon, Sophia's partnership was dissolved. Her lawyer called me directly, threatening litigation. I hung up. By Wednesday, all 3 had retained separate law firms. By Wednesday afternoon, all 3 firms had reviewed the documents and informed my children that everything was completely legal and binding. My phone showed 47 missed calls, 89 text messages. I read none of them. Instead, I painted. Rebecca had taught me watercolors in the last year of her life when she could still hold a brush. I painted the crystal bowl from memory, whole and perfect, filled with cranberry sauce. Friday evening, someone pounded on my door. All 3 of them stood there. Elena in a business suit, makeup smudged from crying. Marcus in jeans and a hoodie, looking like he hadn't slept. Sophia with her phone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. We need to talk, Elena said. I stepped aside and let them in. They crowded into my small living room, looking absurdly out of place among Rebecca's watercolors and our threadbare furniture. You can't do this, Elena started. We'll sue you. With what money? I asked calmly. Your accounts are frozen. Marcus stepped forward. This is because of Thanksgiving? Because of a bowl? Dad, that's insane. I looked at him, really looked at him. My middle son, 42 years old, who hadn't attended his mother's funeral. No, I said quietly. This is because when your mother was dying, she asked me where you were, and I had no answer. This is because you've forgotten that love isn't currency. It's not something you can spend and never repay. Sophia started crying. Real tears this time, not performative ones. Daddy, please. The hotels are my life, and your mother was mine, I said. Where were you when she was dying? Silence. Elena tried a different approach. Okay, we messed up. We'll make this right. Tell us what you want. I want you to understand what you had, I said, and what you lost. I handed each of them an envelope. Inside was a single photograph, the 4 of us at Rebecca's bedside, 1 week before she died. Sophia had taken it actually during one of her 3-hour visits. On the back, in Rebecca's shaking handwriting, were words I'd found only after she died. My greatest architecture, David's. My greatest failure not teaching them to see it. Elena stared at it. Marcus read it 3 times. Sophia's hands were shaking. When you understand what that means, I said, we'll talk. Not before. They tried everything. Pleading, bargaining, threatening. Elena said I was destroying their lives. Marcus said I was bitter and cruel. Sophia said I was punishing them for grieving differently. I stood there and took it all. And when they finally ran out of words, I opened my door. "Get out," I said. They left. If this story is hitting you hard, leave a comment below. Tell me about family, about forgiveness, about what really matters. 6 weeks passed. I liquidated everything. The assets had appreciated over 12 years. The total came to $21.3 million. I kept $8 million to establish a charitable foundation in Rebecca's name, funding architecture scholarships for underprivileged students. The remainder went into trusts for my grandchildren, accessible when they turned 30, not before. My children's fates reached me through the grapevine. Elena had moved to a smaller house, was working as a consultant. Marcus's company had sold for a fraction of its potential value. He'd taken a job in middle management. Sophia had sold the hotels and was managing a chain for someone else. None of them contacted me. I found I didn't mind. I started teaching architecture at the community college. I joined a watercolor class. I made Rebecca's recipes, not the cranberry sauce, never that, and shared them with neighbors who actually appreciated them. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Then, 3 months after that Friday, a letter arrived. Handwritten. From Marcus. I almost threw it away. Instead, I opened it. "Dad," it began. "I got a job at a call center. $16 an hour. My first paycheck was $287 after taxes. I stared at it for an hour. You built a firm from nothing and gave us millions. We never asked how." I kept reading. "I'm sorry. Not sorry I lost the money, sorry I never saw you. I looked at you and saw an ATM, not an architect, not a father. Mom knew, didn't she? That's why she wrote that note." I placed the letter next to Rebecca's photograph on my desk. I didn't reply. Not yet, but I kept it. 1 year later, Thanksgiving arrived again. My townhouse was full. Margaret and her family, neighbors, students from my class, friends from watercolor group. I'd made turkey, mashed potatoes, Rebecca's apple pie. Not cranberry sauce. Never again. The doorbell rang at 5:30. I opened it to find Marcus standing there, alone, holding a small box. "I know I wasn't invited," he said, "but I wanted to give you this." Inside the box were the pieces of Rebecca's crystal bowl. He'd glued them back together with gold kintsugi, the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery. The cracks were visible, highlighted, made beautiful. "It's not perfect," Marcus said, "but it's honest now." I stared at it. At him. At the gold seams running through crystal. "Come in," I said finally. "Dinner's almost ready." He helped me set the table. We didn't talk much, but he was there, present, actually seeing me. After everyone left, I placed the repaired bowl on the mantel, next to Rebecca's portrait. Some things, once broken, can't be what they were. But sometimes the cracks let the light through, and sometimes that's enough.